Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Prashadane Nirvasesha Shanyavadi Pastatadesha Tarane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sri Gaur Bhaktivinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So traditionally Krishna appears on the Astami and of Bhadrapad month, and we've just celebrated Krishna's appearance, so I'll speak a little bit about Krishna. Okay, so Vasudeva and Nanda actually are quite closely related. It's explained that there was the king called Devamida. He had two wives, a Kshatriya wife and a Vaishya wife. And through the Kshatriya wife, he had a son called Sura, and through his Vaishya wife, a son called Parjanya. And then Sura, who was the son, had a son called Vasudeva, and Parjanya had a son called Nanda. So they were like, I guess you called step cousins or something like that. Coming, of course, from Kshatriya, but then Nanda came through the Vaishya wife, and Vasudeva came through the Kshatriya wife, second generation down. So therefore, Vasudeva and Nanda were kind of related. I guess we can call them step cousins or something. So Parjanya was an excellent person, though he came from a different wife. And the Ugrasena and the Yadus they recognized as wonderful qualities, and they gave him this place, a beautiful place to stay, Gokul. And he had 5 sons, starting with Upananda. So at Upananda, Nanda, Sananda, Nandana, and Abhinandana. He had these different sons. And of them, Nanda was not the oldest, he was the middle son, but he had such wonderful qualities that they all thought that he should be the leader of the sons. Therefore, Upananda, who was the eldest, he gave charge of everything, all the land and everything to Nanda. He was the affectionate object of all the brothers and of the father, etc. So they all agreed to this because he had such wonderful qualities. So this, of course, is natural because the devotees of the Lord display all wonderful qualities, as is stated in the Bhagavatam and even in the Nectar Devotion, where it says, Subhada, when we perform bhakti, then we develop all wonderful qualities. So Nanda had all wonderful qualities because he was the best among his devotee. So Nanda, of course, is depicted as elderly because when he bore Krishna, because actually for a long time he didn't have any son. He was kind of fat, had a complexion of sandalwood. He wore reddish cloth, crimson cloth. He was tall and had a beard with slightly whitish hair. And he married Yasoda. Yasoda was the daughter of Sumukha and his wife Patala. And this daughter, Yasoda, had all wonderful qualities as well. And anyone who saw her, they also were inspired to develop wonderful qualities. The name Yasoda, of course, means one who nourishes fame of the cowherds. Yasoda. Yaso means fame or good qualities. Da means to bestow or to nourish. So she inspired everyone to develop wonderful qualities. She is depicted as having a dark complexion, something like Krishna's complexion, actually. And she had great affection, parental affection, and she wears cloth the color of a rainbow. So, as I said, Parjanya was very dedicated to Nanda, and even though Upananda was the eldest, Parjanya gave him the kingdom, Upananda the king, but Upananda, then he thought very carefully and then he gave the whole kingdom to Nanda, his younger brother, because of Nanda's wonderful qualities. So Parjanya gave the kingdom to Upananda, but then Upananda gave it to Nanda Maharaj. And thus Nanda ruled over Gokula along with his other brothers. And Upananda acted as an advisor to Nanda. It's like Bhishma Dev acted for Vichitra Virya. So Upananda, of course, means assistant to Nanda. And Nanda Maharaj took his advice all the time in order to act like a good king and protect the citizens. So because of the rulership of Nanda, that property became very, very prosperous. Braja was populated with wonderful citizens. That Nanda Maharaj had a little bit of a worry because he hadn't got a son. So this was a big problem. The priests performed sacrifices, but nothing happened. So if one thinks of Krishna enough, Krishna will appear somehow or other. So because Nanda Maharaj and Yasoda were great devotees of the Lord and are always thinking of Krishna, then Krishna made his appearance as the son of Nanda. Of course, even he became the son of Vasudeva. We all know that Vasudeva and Devaki were imprisoned, and the seventh child actually was transferred, of Devaki was transferred into the womb of Rohini, who was not in prison. Rohini was sent by Vasudeva to Braja to be protected by Nanda Maharaj. So she arrived there secretly, faithful to her husband Vasudeva, and Nanda Maharaj, seeing her, was very joyful and gave her great protection. And when she arrived, she was pregnant 3 months already. And yes, vows for 1 year with fasting, etc. Then Narayana appeared in their dream. So Narayan pacified them and said, you don't have to worry. You have such intense devotion for me, so that you should not lament. And this child, who has a bluish complexion like an atasi flower, will appear as your son. And actually, he appears in every kalpa, every day of Brahma. And of course, previously, Drona and Dara had done austerities to get the Lord of their son also. And they are expansions actually of Nanda and Yasoda. So Yasoda then saw that in the month of Magha, a child was transferred from Nanda's heart to her heart. And a girl also entered her womb. This, of course, was Yogamaya. So all of this indicates that this child is not a material child born out of man and women in an ordinary way. There's a transfer of the child from heart to heart, not through regular means. So in this way, Krishna appeared in the heart of Yasoda and in her womb, and he illuminated the whole universe. All right. So Yogamaya entered into Rohini's room and transferred this other embryo, who was actually from Devaki's womb, into her womb. And after 14 months of pregnancy, Stravana, doing Stravana constellation, Rohini gave birth to Balaram. Oops. So that's, of course, 8 days before Krishna, the full moon of Shravana, is followed by Bhadra month, and then it goes into the Astami, etc. And when the Astami appeared, then Krishna was born, so about 8 days later. So Rohini gave birth to Balaram, who was previously the son of, we could say, the son of, in one sense, the son of Devaki, but then and became the son of Rohini. So Balaram is whitish in complexion, so he has a face like the moon, with eyes like lightning, hair like a rain cloud, which means very dark. His complexion was like a white autumn cloud. His effulgence was like the sun. So he was also a form of the Supreme Lord. And of course, he is known as the elder brother of Krishna, who would be the killer of Dhenukasura, protector of the cows, etc. Oops. Now, Balaram was born through Rohini, but actually, he used to sit on the lap of Yasoda because Yasoda had Krishna in her heart. So when that happened, Balaram became very happy to associate with Yasoda. And then in the 8th month of Yasoda's pregnancy, it was time for the birth to take place. Okay. So, as I mentioned, on the 8th lunar day of the waning phase of the moon in Bhadra month, Krishna appeared when the moon was in Rohini Nakshatra, which is exalted actually. And this happens once in the day of Brahma during the 20. So this is a long comparison here given. Here. Though meditation appears in Satya Yuga, sacrifice appears in Treta Yuga, deity worship appears in Dwapara Yuga, and chanting appears in Kali Yuga. While the jasmine blooms in spring, while the mango appears in summer, water becomes clear only in autumn, while the harvest appears in the winter. Though the kunda flower, this jasmine flower, appears in the cold season, while the lotus blooms during the day, though planets give auspiciousness according to arrangements of astrological scripture, and though the Lord appears only by the power of Guru, by the influence of Krishna, all these occurred at this time. So when Krishna was born, everything which was out of season but auspicious appeared. So the flowers which are auspicious in different seasons appeared in that Bhadra month. The lotus that blooms in the day bloomed at night, and all planets which usually have different arrangements, they all became auspicious at that time. And all the forms of worship, meditation, sacrifice, deity worship, and chanting all manifested at this time of Krishna's birth. So in this way, everything became auspicious. All the auspicious elements of all the different seasons appeared when Krishna made his appearance. The jasmine bloomed with the spring creeper, blossomed with the ketaki flowers of spring. The lotuses bloomed with the night blooming lilies. This is only a slight indication of the events that occurred when Krishna was born. Balaram was described as being white in complexion. Krishna had a face, his face was the king of blue lotus, so he's blue. His eyes were like the lords of central lotus petals surrounded by tiny bees. His nose was like a sesame flower, a bolt tinged like a blue cloud. His lips were red like hibiscus, more attractive than the bimba fruit or the banduka flower. His ears were black like shama creeper. His forearms were the foremost branches of the tamal tree endowed with new buds. The tamal tree has got a blackish trunk. His chest marked with the Srivatsa and the line of Lakshmi was like the chief of clouds with a stationary lightning turning to the right. The Srivatsa is a mark of hair which turns clockwise. And Lakshmi, the line of Lakshmi is a golden line. And so these were on his chest. So, as I mentioned, there was a sister, also a younger sister, who also was born at this time. This is Yogamaya. She took birth from Yasoda, putting Krishna first, so she became second. This is all by the arrangement of the Lord for certain purposes. And simultaneously, in the prison house, Vasudeva and Devaki, to them, they had a four-arm form appeared. And then turned into a two that manifested to Vasudeva and Devaki. So that four-arm form of Krishna merged into the two-arm form. And that two-arm form was actually originally the child of Nanda and Yasoda. So in other words, we should not think that Nanda and Yasoda are the foster parents of Krishna. They're the actual parents of Krishna. And simultaneously, he's also the child of the son of Vasudeva and Devaki. So he appears simultaneously to them. Okay. So Yasoda was not aware she had two children. That is Krishna and Yogamaya. She fainted when she was bearing the children. So Yogamaya was sleeping there with Krishna. Vasudeva took the two-armed child away, fearing that Kamsa was going to kill him, and he did this because everyone fell asleep. The guards fell asleep, and all the prison doors opened up. So Vasudeva just walked out with Krishna in his arms in the rainstorm, and he brought the female the child there. And then he took the female, he saw the female child, he took that child and put the other child down, and that merged back into Krishna, who was actually born to Yasoda and Nanda.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, I think it is freezing your internet, I think. I can't hear you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah, we can hear now. Go ahead, Maharaj.
Can you see the thing?
Yes, Maharaj.
Okay. So he's sometimes compared to a shining sapphire, which a sapphire, of course, is a bluish color, a gem which is blue, deep blue. At the same time, his face is compared to the moon because it is so effulgent. His eyes are like astonishing lotuses because of their grace and coolness. His hands were more resplendent than new leaves of the branches of a heavenly desire tree. When he moved his hands a little bit, when he was a small child and cried out, he bewildered the whole universe. But when Yasoda saw this beautiful child, she was stunned. She couldn't move. She was like a painted picture, seeing the beauty of that child. So when the child was born, then there was a wonderful celebration, which we also celebrate the birth of Krishna. So one old woman who was aware of the birth came to Nanda Maharaj and told him about the birth of this child when he was milking the cows. So immediately when everyone heard about the birth of the son, they became very joyful. And Nanda became ecstatic. His hair stood on end. And he was very, very blissful and could not even speak. So he was eager to see that son. And of course, he was very eager, but his body was trembling. So the Supreme Lord Narayan supported him with his hand, and then Nanda was able to walk to the house. So a huge crowds gathered along with Nanda, and when Nanda arrived, there was crowds and crowds of people like streams of the Ganga flowing together, and there were thousands of women carrying auspicious items, and they were worshiping Yasoda because of the birth of the son. Brahmanas were called, and they began to chant mantras for giving blessings. They placed auspicious items on the child's head. And Nanda, of course, was overcome with happiness. And then Nanda entered the inner chambers. Generally, the child is protected, so they put him inside and they don't allow too many people to see. With some young boys, Brahmin boys who had Vedic knowledge. And Rohini understood that Nanda had come. So then she brought that child of Yasoda so that Nanda could see it at the entrance. And then Nanda saw that child, who again was so beautiful. It was like the chief of blue lotuses, whose splendor no one could surpass. He was a playground of rare, soft, spotless beauty. All his limbs were superior to an image of a flawless blue chintamani, crafted by astonishing Vishvakarma with the greatest endeavor. So here, there's not a sapphire, but now we have a blue chintamani stone. A chintamani stone, of course, is we don't have them anymore in the world, but it's a stone. You think of anything and it fulfills all your desires. So Krishna was like a blue chintamani stone. His soft curled hair was the color of new Shaivala plants growing in the still waters of the Jamuna. It's the type of water weed that grows in the water, blackish in color, spread with ointment made of powdered Vaidurya gems. His eyes were purer than the central petals of the blue lotus held in the hand of Lakshmi. His hands, feet, and lips defeated the buds growing on a desire tree of Vaikuntha. The child was attractive, with cloth the hue haritala or saffron, defeating the color of gold. So the newborn child, Krishna, was wearing golden cloth, and he was bluish in complexion. So when the child is born, they have a jat karma. So the brahmanas, the Sharma brahmanas came and performed the birth ceremony, which is there to give intelligence to the child and long life. So they chanted mantras and fed ghee. They take ghee and stick it on a piece of gold, and they put it in the mouth of the child. They gave blessings for long life, chanting a mantra in the child's ear. And they touched the child and gave blessings. They consecrated the earth with a mantra starting Om Pridam Annam Pranaya Pranaya in the four directions in the center. They had the child lie down on the bed with another mantra. They purified the mother with a mantra. They sprinkled water on the breasts of the mother to purify them, and so that the breast would produce milk. They turned the child on his back while chanting another mantra near his head, and they fixed a water pot there for auspiciousness. So at this time, Nanda Maharaj gave charity. This is a standard thing to do on an auspicious occasion. So Nanda Maharaj gave 10,000 cows, and then 100,000 cows, then 1,000,000 cows, then 2,000,000 cows, all decorated with golden horns. He gave 7 piles of sesame, each 10 dronas in volume, like a big mountain of sesame. And the cowherds, they sprinkled milk and yogurt on each other till they were all white, as it looked like they were waves in the ocean, in the milk ocean, dancing around. So this was the joyous celebration of Krishna's birth. So Nanda gave charity without having anybody requesting it. So the amount of charity he gave made Chintamani stones look like misers, or desire trees look like misers, because he gave more than anyone could imagine. And Nanda Maharaj was simply thinking that Narayan should bless his child. That's all he wanted. So that was the purpose of the charity he was giving. So though Vraja was already prosperous when Krishna took birth, and then Vraja increased in its wealth and in its beauty and all wonderful qualities. And the place was remarkable. All sorts of wonderful people took birth there. That means that the cowherd people gave birth to women or children who would later become the gopis and the cowherd boys. So they all developed, had children, etc. So Nanda, of course, had, as I said, wonderful qualities. So therefore, naturally, he gave unlimited charity. Of course, he had unlimited wealth, and he made unlimited arrangements for festivals. He had unlimited servants, unlimited protection for all the people, and he had unlimited attention to all matters of protecting everyone. So he cared for Krishna and Balaram. Even though Balaram was not his son, he cared for him as his own son. So the two of them were cared for by Nanda and Yasoda and Rohini very nicely. Okay, fine. Okay, any question there?
Looks like no question at.
Okay.
Maybe you can throw some light on Maharaj, Lord Krishna leaving Vrindavan but not leaving Vrindavan.
Well, of course, Krishna is everywhere. He's always in the spiritual world. He never leaves the spiritual world to come to the material world. He's always there. And even though he may leave Vrindavan here, in another verse, he's still in Vrindavan, and another universe, another universe, another universe, he's still there. So in that sense, he's there. But in another way, we see separation of the devotees of Vrindavan from Krishna. That separation, though it is there in one sense, is simultaneously not there, because through their great desire for Krishna, Krishna appears internally to them. So that's one way in which Krishna can appear. So it is said that the separation from Krishna looks like lamentation, but ultimately it's the greatest bliss. So that's difficult to understand, but somehow or other, the internal manifestation of Krishna during the separation gives rise to a greater bliss than when Krishna is actually there. That's what it seems to be. So in that sense, Krishna is always there with the people. There's another way of explaining it, and that is that Krishna leaves Vrindavan and goes to Mathura, and he promised, I'll come back soon. And then when Nanda Maharaj and all the cowherdmen went back, he said, you better go back now, take care of the place, protect it, and I will soon come. So he made several promises to the gopis and to Nanda Maharaj, Yasoda, and everyone, come back. And that was a few days afterwards. And then everybody waited, and he didn't come back. And they waited 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, and they became more and more disturbed waiting for Krishna to come back. Krishna made a promise. If Krishna does not keep his promise, then what can we do? He should keep his promise to the highest devotees. And in Bhagavad Gita makes a promise, yeah, my devotee is never vanquished, etc. So if Krishna doesn't keep his promise, what use is anything? What use is bhakti? Especially the highest devotees. So Krishna should keep his promise. And the devotees were expecting that Krishna should come back. And if he doesn't come back, that means we're the worst devotees. And Krishna maybe is not affectionate, has no affection at all for us. But that's not true. So then what happened? And then not only they waited for that time, Krishna sent Uddhava. He didn't come back first. And he sent Uddhava with a message to pacify Nanda, Yasoda, the cowherd people, and the gopis. About what good is the message you gave? They wanted to see Krishna directly, have it back there permanently. But then Krishna went off to Dwarka and didn't come back. And then some years later, the people were so in anxiety, they went to Kurukshetra to meet Krishna. There they met Krishna and they didn't want to leave him. But then finally Krishna had to leave for Dwarka. So he said, you come with me. And they said, no, we can't go. So then they all went back to Vrindavan. Krishna promised all will come back. So again, he promised. And they waited and waited again. And it looked like he didn't come back. However, though the Bhagavad doesn't mention it, it is mentioned in Padma Purana that after killing Dantavakra near the gate of Dwarka, when no one was there anymore because they're all in Mathura, sorry. Everybody was in Dwarka. He went to Mathura, and that's where Dantavakra was, and he killed him there. After he killed Dantavakra, he crossed the river and went to Vrindavan, and there he united with the people of Vrindavan. And actually, he remained there eternally, apricot, and he went back to Dwarka after that in another form. So in that sense, he did fulfill his promise, finally, after many, many years. But still, there is a problem there because he said, I'll return soon, and he didn't go soon. It was many, many years. That is not soon. And meanwhile, the people were suffering so much. So what is the solution to this? So Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur explains that Krishna did go back in one form after 3 months. So it wasn't too long. But then, of course, we see, normally we don't see him going back. But how could he go back? Because the people were waiting there and they waited, then they went to Kurukshetra. So it looks like he didn't return. So the explanation is when Uddhava got there with the message, actually Krishna had returned in one form, because when Uddhava came to Vrindavan, there's a description of the cowherd people in great happiness, calling the cows, etc., etc. So that indicates that Krishna was there. Otherwise, they wouldn't be calling out in joy to the cows. So in one form, Krishna did go back. In another form, he wasn't there. So the people were all lamenting, and that's described also. Uddhava went to the house of Nanda and Yasoda, and they were not speaking, they were not eating, they were not cooking any food. So they were all in great distress, and all the people were in great distress. The gopis were in great distress. So in other words, there are two versions of Vrindavan. One, Krishna didn't come back and everybody was joyful after a few months. Another where they were in great separation. So usually we see the great separation form of Vrindavan, which lasted until Krishna killed Dantavakra at Mathura and went back to Vrindavan there. But there's another form of Vrindavan also where Krishna did go back from Mathura, and then ever after that, the people were very, very joyful with Krishna. So therefore, there's two sets of Brajavasis simultaneously existing. One set in union with Krishna, very joyful, and another set in great separation, lamenting his lack of presence there like that. So we have simultaneously two sets of Vrindavan with two sets of Brajavasis, one with Krishna, one without Krishna. So in that way, Krishna does fulfill his promise and does go back in one form. In the other form, he has this extended separation to show the extent of the love of the people of Vrindavan, because in separation, the love intensifies. So through that long separation, he showed the world the greatness of the people of Vraja, and especially the gopis, who went through great feelings of separation, and they showed ecstatic symptoms, etc., that nobody else could manifest. So, in this way, he showed the exalted nature of the people of Vrindavan by that prolonged separation. But even then, in the pastimes, external pastimes, he did come back later on. So in that way, Krishna doesn't leave Vrindavan in that way also. He does come back in several ways.
Thank you, Maharaj. Another twist to that, the Vrindavan Vasudeva Krishna versus Shyam Sundar Krishna. Who has killed the demons? Is Shyam Sundar Krishna or Vasudeva? And who went to Dwarka? Is that Shyam Sundar Krishna or Vasudeva Krishna? We can shed some more light on that.
Yeah. Well, we have, as is described in Nectar Devotion, Krishna has a Purna form in Dwarka, well, a Purnatara or more perfect form in Mathura, and a Purnatama form or most perfect form in Vrindavan. So in one sense, Krishna is one, it's only one Krishna in one sense, but he manifests differently, slightly differently in these three places. So in Vrindavan, he manifests his full sweetness. We know his four qualities, his four special qualities of sweetness are there. So he manifests them fully in Vrindavan, a little bit more covered in Mathura, and more covered in Dwarka, because the Aishvarya aspect, where people see him as Supreme Lord and powerful, becomes more prominent as Krishna goes to Mathura and then to Dwarka. So that eclipses the sweetness aspect. So therefore, we can say that Krishna manifests a little bit less sweetness there. But in Vrindavan, Krishna is, though he is sweet, that does not mean he's weak. He also manifests the most power, but it's hidden. So Brahma is able to see that power of Krishna because Krishna manifests all the calves and cowherd boys, and then he turned them all into Vishnu forms. So there were billions of Vishnu forms manifested from the calves and cowherds, and Brahma saw that. And then he saw that the Vishnus were creating universes, and the universes there were Shiva and Brahma and all the Devatas, and all the demons, and all the elements, etc. And then suddenly they all merged into Krishna, who was a 5-year-old boy. So then Brahma realized Krishna is more powerful than Mahavishnu or any of the Vaikuntha Vishnus or anybody, because he can manifest by, just by his will, he can manifest millions of these forms and make them disappear. So therefore, within Vrindavan, Krishna also manifests powers to certain persons at certain times, as he manifested to Yasoda, the universe within himself. And he saw, Yasoda saw everything inside Krishna's body, the whole universe. So therefore, Krishna in Vrindavan kills demons, whatever, no problem for him. He kills them in such a way that people don't see that as his power. He hides it. So when he kills Putana, they don't really know how he does it. He sucks out her life here, but nobody can really see what happens. Or when Trinavarta falls to the ground, they can't really see how it happens. He got heavier and heavier and he fell, but people can't really see it. Suddenly he falls from the sky and then Krishna's playing on his lap or something like that. So often Krishna kills demons, but he hides it. He's the most powerful person, but he hides his powerful aspect. So in this way, Krishna is always Krishna. We will call him as the son of Vasudeva when we see him as having powers as the Supreme Lord. So Vasudeva and Devaki saw the four-arm form of Krishna, Vishnu. Then they saw the two-arm form. So they're quite conscious that Krishna is actually also like Vishnu. So they're quite aware of his powers. And when they see the affection of Nanda and Yasoda for Krishna and Balaram, they are astonished, because Yasoda and Nanda never see Krishna and Balaram as Supreme Lord, and they don't see him with reverence at all. So therefore, when we start seeing Krishna with the awe and reverence and being the Supreme Lord, that's where the Vasudeva aspect of Krishna comes in Mathura and then in Dwarka. But in Vrindavan, nobody really sees that, even though he does show powers. It is always somewhat covered up by their affection and by Krishna's own arrangements. So in that way, you can say that Krishna in Vrindavan manifests as supreme form of sweetness. He manifests powers, but remains somewhat hidden. Somebody has their hand up there.
Yes, thank you so much, Maharaj. Yeah, Amrutam Prabhu, go ahead. After that, Abhay Prabhu has another question. Yeah, go ahead, Amrutam.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj. Please accept my humble obeisance. All Krishna Srila Prabhupada. Thank you for sharing, Maharaj. My question is, in Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna says, Janma Karma Chame Divyam, and it is the one who knows my appearance and activities. Maharaj, if you could please give some more understanding on what does this word know mean? Because almost everyone from India, since childhood, we've heard the pastimes of Krishna's birth, so we are familiar, we know it. But what is this meaning of know? And if it is just at that level of knowing, then why all the sadhana and everything else that we do in bhakti?
Yeah. So knowing, of course, has many levels of meaning. And also, not only the word know, you have to know them as divya. So we have to know the true nature of this bhakti. And many people, we know about Krishna. He was somebody born 5,000 years ago. He was a great person who killed some demons, killed some materialists. So some people think of him as a material entity. They know him, but they know him as a material entity. So obviously, real knowledge, it means as a devotee, we accept Krishna differently. So we know Krishna differently. We read a Bhagavad Gita with faith. Then we have a different type of knowledge. Some people read the Bhagavad Gita without faith. So they know Krishna, they know Bhagavad Gita, but it's different. Their knowledge of Bhagavad Gita is on another level. They're thinking of it as material. So knowledge itself, when we're talking about knowing Krishna, is his birth and his activities and his form are all spiritual. We have to accept that first of all and understand that spiritual is different from material. That is one level of knowledge, and that when we get that far, that is a plus point for us. That means we're on the path of bhakti, and eventually we attain prema. Then we go to spiritual world, no more birth and death. Demons also know Krishna. They see Krishna, they fight with him. In that sense, they know him. But that doesn't guarantee they get liberation or go to the spiritual world. So the knowledge must mean accepting with faith what is stated in Krishna, about Krishna in the scripture. That's one level. That, of course, in itself is pointing us in the right direction. And through that, eventually we do get the spiritual world, but it's not immediate. The other type of knowledge is realized knowledge, which will appear in bhava and prema. So yes, when we get to prema, then definitely we are qualified for spiritual body, etc. We cannot see Krishna with material eyes. Therefore, if we actually realize Krishna, we must have spiritual eyes and spiritual body. And when we got the spiritual eyes and body, then we can just give up the material body and enter the spiritual world, no more birth and death, etc. So at that stage, of course, is more immediate. But even knowing with faith on the lower level of sadhana, that is more or less a guarantee that eventually we will go beyond birth and death. Where there's other people who know Krishna in a material way, there's no guarantee at all. So that's one step. But of course, the realized knowledge is superior, and therefore, very quickly after that, one attains spiritual world. In that sense, no more birth and death.
Thank you, Maharaj. Very nice. Thank you.
There's another hand up there.
Yeah. And there is also another question I sent Maharaj to you directly. Balram Nitai Prabhu, yeah, go ahead. After that we'll answer.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. The question regarding I have is consciousness. The Mayavada's explanation of consciousness, or the Advaita's explanation of consciousness, is that there is only one consciousness and then appears into multiple forms. As well as Prabhupada named this society as International Society for Krishna Consciousness. So can you give us the difference between our Achinta Abheda Tattva's consciousness concept and against the Advaita's consciousness?
Yeah, in Advaita or Shankar's philosophy, nothing exists ultimately except Brahman, which is consciousness. So there's only one consciousness and nothing else. So you cannot be conscious of something because there is nothing else. So if there's only one consciousness, there is no possibility of bhakti or prema, because bhakti and prema require two individuals. One person who experiences something and an object of love who is experienced. So that means there is the jiva and Supreme Lord, or many jivas and Supreme Lord. So we accept that no, there's not one consciousness. There's one supreme consciousness, Bhagavan, who manifests as Bhagavan, Paramam, and Brahman. Plus, they're all infinite individual points of consciousness, particles of consciousness called jivas. So they're also conscious, they have a sense of I. So there's not one, there's many. And they are eternal, and they never merge back into Brahman, bits of separated Brahman who merge back into him. No, they're always jiva, particles of consciousness. So though they are particles of consciousness and therefore different from the Supreme Lord, they're not completely different because they have similar qualities. They're conscious, have a sense of I, they can experience, they can do, etc. They have a form. So there are also great similarity between the Lord and the devotee or the jiva. However, the difference is that the jiva can fall into ignorance. So we have jivas in the material world conditioned by ignorance and taking material bodies birth after birth with karma, etc. Quite unlike the Supreme Lord. So there's difference and non-difference between the jiva and the Supreme Lord. So we say that it's Achinta Bheda Bhed. The jiva is one with and different from the Lord. One with the Lord, but having similarity, and also different because his possibility of becoming conditioned, contaminated, etc. So in this way, by being different, there is that possibility that we can develop bhakti and prema and rasa and bliss, because bliss can only arise through a relationship of rasa, and rasa can only arise because of two individuals, not one. So therefore, when the jiva and the Lord do exist, we have the possibility of rasa and then bliss. So this is much higher than oneness of Brahman, where the bliss of Brahman is simply being one. What bliss is that? So the bliss arises through relationship of rasa, and that exists because there are jivas and Supreme Lord. There's this question in the chat. Devotees carry Krishna in their heart. What is the real need of visiting dhamas like Vrindavan and others. Okay, yeah, devotees carry Krishna in the heart. Ultimately, no need. If you can remember Krishna always in your heart, there's no necessity. If we're doing sadhana, of course, that's another thing, because in sadhana, we're not always remembering Krishna. We struggle to do that sometimes. So we have different things we can do to help us in the process of remembering the Lord. So we have chanting the Lord's name. We have hearing scriptures about the Lord, hearing about his wonderful pastimes and qualities and form. We worship the deity. We associate with devotees. We live in the holy dham. So these are ways in which we can assist our remembrance of the Lord at all times as sadhakas. If we're on the highest stage, of course, we don't need anything, because we're always just thinking of the Lord, and wherever we are, whatever, we're oblivious of that particular place. We're not contaminated or affected by anything in the material world. But if we're on the sadhana level, then we do get affected. So we have to be careful, choose our activities, our environment, our association, etc. We have to be very, very careful about that in order to not create deviation for the mind, etc. So in that way. It is said, of course, that it's not possible for all people to live in the dham. They have jobs, they have families, etc. So not everybody can do that. Maybe 1 out of 1,000 or something can do that, and 1 out of 10,000 maybe can do that. Jiva Goswami also says, yes, it may not be possible to live in the dham. So if you can't live in the dham, then you meditate on the dham. So at least you should have some idea about yourself living in the spiritual world. Even if you cannot technically live there, physically live there, you at least meditate on living in the spiritual world, and with your serving in your spiritual body. Okay.
Wonderful, Maharaj. Thank you. Anyone else has questions? I have some more, but before that, let me see. Anyone else has questions? Malram Nathai Prabhu? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Hare Krishna Maharaj. Thank you for that explanation of difference. I have a question that I think if I remember correctly, Gaudiyas have a translation on Vedanta, which is called as, I think, Govinda Bhashya. Is it available? English translation of that book is available?
Yes, I translated that. It's on Amazon.
So what? Oh, it's on Amazon. Okay, and what is the name of that book?
Govinda Bhashya, Baladev Vidyabhusan.
Govinda. Okay, thank you, Maharaj. I'll read that. Yeah,
but not the sutras. It's a little complicated because it's all philosophical.
Yeah. I like that, so I'm going to.
Oh, you like philosophy?
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Okay.
Anyone else?
No,
if you don't mind, you can share some pastimes of Srila Prabhupada, your interaction, your experience with the Srila Prabhupada. Since we have just had Srila Prabhupada Vyasa Puja Day, Appearance Day.
Oh, you celebrated when, yesterday?
No, on Thursday.
On Thursday?
Yeah, next day of Janmashtami. So, like to hear your pastimes with Srila Prabhupada.
Oh, yeah, a little late. Okay, well, yeah. Srila Prabhupada, of course, appeared at a particular time, which is very interesting. Time of great transformation and change everywhere in the world. Change in India, because, of course, he grew up at a time when the British were dominating India, and then the independence movement started. Then there was the World War, etc. So all a great First World War, Second World War, all these things, famines in India, etc. So it was a lot of turbulence in India, rebellion, independence, and things like this. And amidst this, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was preaching, which is maybe a little difficult with all those other interests there, people trying to survive and become independent. Bhaktisiddhanta was preaching at that time, and remarkably, he got some, good success because he managed to spread all over India. And Prabhupada was born in that, but then Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur disappeared, and then the Gaudiya Math disintegrated after about 10 years and broke into parts. So Prabhupada, of course, was and so inspired by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's instruction to preach to the English-speaking public that he never forgot that. And in spite of all the problems in the Gaudiya Math, etc., and in spite of the fact that his own business fell apart and whatever, he still treasured that order of his guru. And as he mentions later on, I'm only successful because of, following the order of my spiritual master. So that he kept in his heart. And we see that he took vanaprastha, then he took sannyas, and all through that period, it was a big struggle because he got no support, but he was trying to write. So he publishes Back to Godhead magazine in India, and you can see the place where he was doing his work there in Radha Damodar, and in Chippiwada in Delhi. They purchased the place now where he used to stay while he was printing Bhagavatam, etc. Very great hardships he had to go through to print, because he had to earn his own money, he had to print it, he had to proof everything, he had to distribute everything himself, and even then, not many buyers. People didn't take. So that was the condition of India after the war. Also, they were westernizing under Nehru. So very, very great struggles he went through, and then finally he gave up and went to America. And then America was going through changes also at the time. So by great coincidence, the young people were fed up with Western society, whereas India was trying to become westernized. So it was a very interesting time when Prabhupada went there. People were receptive. And then finally the young people began joining him within like 7 or 8 years. Suddenly this whole movement blossomed. So that was some great determination of Srila Prabhupada to expand the movement within like 8 years or so, 10 years, we can say. Suddenly from zero, he ended up with hundreds of temples around the world, so many devotees. And he established not only in the West, then he came back to India. And with the money from the West, then he established Vrindavan and Mayapur and Bombay. That he established those centers, and of course also in Hyderabad. So he had some great vision of spreading around the world and also establishing some great permanent places in India itself in the future. So he started that, didn't complete it, but after his disappearance, of course, India has thrived, etc. So he had great foresight. And one of his great worries was that he didn't want the society to fragment as the Gaudiya Math had fragmented. So therefore, he was trying to take precautions against that. And instead of appointing one person as the head, he made the GBC instead. And he kept emphasizing the fact that, you should break apart. And he also established himself as the founder Acharya. So he put his own self in a permanent position to unify the whole of the movement forever. So he tried to keep the movement together in that way. So that's one of his great contributions. So even after 50 years, the movement is still here. Though we see other spiritual movements that start out in India, most of them have disappeared after about 10 years after the disappearance of their leader. So we've gone on for 50 years. So that's quite an accomplishment. But we should work even harder to expand the movement everywhere. And that's our contribution to Srila Prabhupada, to keep the movement together and to keep it expanding.
Thank you so much, Maharaj. But your meeting and your interaction, little bit, want to share, Maharaj?
Yeah, well, yeah, I met Srila Prabhupada in Japan, actually, 1970, 71 or so, like that. But I was not a devotee at that time. But from there, then I came to India when Prabhupada went to India. And then I stayed in India for about a year. So that's where I got most of my association with Prabhupada. But it wasn't really that close because I wasn't even a devotee at that time. So I didn't know too much. So I was just wandering around there with the devotees, but didn't know so much. So that was my first association with Prabhupada. But through that, I could understand his great dedication to preaching Krishna consciousness at all times. He was spending so much time trying to preach to people and also dedicating so much time every day to translating and commenting on Srimad Bhagavatam and Chaitanya Charitamrita. So he's very, very dedicated to that. And then simultaneously from India, we go to the West and come back to India again like this, traveling all over, simply to establish the movement in other places and as well as India. So he showed great stamina and determination to do all of this.
Thank you. Hope we would like to see you in person at our temple in Central New Jersey.
Okay, fine.
Invite you. So if you come to US, please visit us.
Okay, fine. Okay, great.
Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna.
Valuable time. Madhubal bro, you want to say anything?
No. Hare Krishna.
Krishna.
Okay.
Thank you. Very well. Anchakalpadrubhya Kripasindhu
Jai.
is joining for the Chandanyatra festival today evening, Sunday program from 4 o'clock. 4 to 5:30 is Krishna dress competition. 5:30 onwards, Tulsi Arati and Guru Puja, followed by Gaur Arati and class. So, and Prasadam will be served today, being Ekadasi, another Ekadasi, fasting from grains and beans. Tomorrow, Parna time, I think 6:38 to 10:30. 1 minute. And the next big festival is coming up is Radhashtami, which is Parna time is 6:33 to 10:46. Radhashtami is on September 22nd, Friday. Before that, I think Advaita Acharya Prabhu's concert. Sita Thakurani's appearance there on 19 September, Tuesday. And Lalita Devi's appearance there. Srimati Radharani's associate there. Close associate, 21st September, that is Thursday, just a day before Srimati Radharani's appearance. Okay, thank you all for your association and time. We'll see you all in the evening. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, everybody. Hare Krishna.